until today. And maybe, just maybe, that was the universe's plan all along. Because in the middle of a crowded city festival, where gospel voices soared above laughter and the smell of roasted peanuts, something else cut through the noise. Not a song, not a face, a memory carried on the notes of a saxophone, a melody that once belonged to her, and only her. Adwoa Owusu froze mid-step. It couldn't be. Not here. Not after all this time. And yet, the music told her otherwise. Welcome, my beautiful family, to Elite Romance, a place where love is not just spoken, it is lived. Here, every story is a heartbeat, every moment a bridge between the broken and the healed, every silence heavy with meaning. Romance in our world is not just about passion, it's about presence, resilience, and the everyday miracles that keep people together when the world tries to pull them apart. At Elite Romance, we believe that love is both fragile and unshakable. It is the rhythm and gospel, the warmth and laughter, the courage and forgiveness. Each story we share is crafted to touch your heart, to lift your spirit, and to remind you that you are not alone on this journey. Whether you come for comfort, for inspiration, or for a spark of hope in the quiet hours, you belong here. So if you're listening now, know this. You are more than an audience. You are family. Your presence, your voice, and your support are what keep this community alive. Stay connected, comment, share your thoughts, and let this space be your haven of love, music, and truth. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us here at Elite Romance, where every story is a second chance and every heartbeat tells a new beginning. The festival roared with voices, gospel choirs lifting praise into the rafters of the old train station turned community stage. Children darted between folding chairs, balloons brushing against dusty beams, the smell of roasted peanuts and sweet kettle corn wrapping the air. Adwa Owusu moved carefully through the crowd, one hand steadying her daughter's curls, the other gripping her son's restless fingers, both children tugging her in opposite directions. The stage lights flickered in gold across her face, and for a moment, she felt like the world was reminding her of the stage she once commanded, though now she walked with the weight of responsibility instead of the spotlight. Her heart raced, not from joy, but from the fatigue of survival, the endless balance between motherhood, work, and dreams deferred. Her daughter Ava asked about candy, her son Eli wanted a balloon sword, and Adwoa promised both later, though she barely had money for one. She scanned for an empty seat, the choir's voices rolling deep and heavy through the iron arches, the rhythm echoing through her chest. Then a saxophone entered the music, smooth, familiar, carrying notes she once knew as well as her own skin. It slid through the noise like silk, climbing above the choir, then dipping low, coaxing memories she had buried too deep to touch. Her breath caught, her grip on Eli's hand tightened until he whined, and she forced herself to let go. The sound was impossible, yet it pierced her with undeniable truth. Jordan Carter. Edwoa froze near a row of vendors, her children already distracted by paper fans and colorful streamers. She turned her head toward the stage and saw him, not on stage but behind it, speaking with organizers, his hand resting casually on the polished brass of the very saxophone that had stolen her breath 3 years ago. He wore a tailored jacket, dark, effortless, his hair cropped close, his jawline sharper than she remembered. But it wasn't the way he looked that struck her. It was the audacity of fate, shoving him into the same space after years of silence, after nights when she cried alone in cramped apartments, after mornings when she sang lullabies to children who bore his eyes. She pressed her hand to her chest, forcing herself to breathe. Eli tugged her arm again. "Mama, the man has your song," he whispered, his voice curious, innocent. Adwoa knelt, forcing her lips to curve into a calm. "It's just music, sweetheart," she answered, though her throat burned with the lie. Ava leaned into her other side, giggling as she pointed at Jordan's saxophone gleaming in the light. Adwoa wanted to run, to pull both children out of the station before her heart betrayed her resolve, yet her legs refused to move. Instead, she watched, unable to turn away, her mind clawing between anger and longing, betrayal and memory. Jordan's laughter reached her next, low, warm, disarming. He greeted the choir director with an embrace, his posture confident, his presence magnetic, as if the years had only sharpened him. Adwoa remembered those same arms wrapped around her shoulders on cold nights in Atlanta, the promises whispered into her skin, the way he once said she was his compass, his future. Then the silence came, brutal and unyielding, swallowing every vow. She had raised twins through storms without him, carried weight that was never supposed to be hers alone, and now here he was, untouched, unbroken, daring to breathe the same air as her children. Her chest tightened with fury she had no space to release. The children tugged again, demanding snacks, and Adwoa forced her body to move. She guided them toward a concession table, her hands shaking as she pulled a few crumpled bills from her purse. The woman behind the counter offered a kind smile, but Adwoa barely noticed, her eyes flicking back toward Jordan as if drawn by gravity. Then it happened. His gaze shifted, his conversation faltered, and his eyes found hers through the crowd. His expression stilled, laughter dying on his lips, his shoulders stiffening as recognition stormed across his face. The air between them tightened, heavy, unrelenting. She looked away first, clutching Ava's small fingers, but it was too late. The collision had already happened. Jordan stepped forward, weaving past rows of folding chairs, ignoring the greetings of old colleagues. His eyes stayed locked on her, his chest rising faster with each stride, until he stood only feet away. The saxophone gleamed at his side, but his hands trembled as though he was holding fire. "Adwoa," he said, voice low, edged with disbelief. Her body flinched at the sound, her children turning curiously toward the stranger who spoke their mother's name. She lifted her chin, forcing steel into her spine. "Enjoying the festival," she replied, her tone calm, measured, but her pulse a hammer against her ribs. Eli looked up at Jordan, his wide gray eyes curious, almost too familiar. "Mama, do you know him?" the boy asked, his voice light. Adwoa swallowed hard, her throat raw, her body screaming with the weight of the question. Jordan's jaw tightened as he glanced at the boy, then back at her, a thousand unspoken words burning between them. She steadied herself, pressing her palm to Eli's shoulder. "Just someone I used to know," she whispered, each word tasting like ash. Jordan flinched, but he did not retreat. His eyes softened, then hardened, torn between desperation and restraint. He glanced at Ava, her curls bouncing as she clutched her balloon, then back to Eli, whose gaze mirrored his own in a way that could not be denied. His lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. Adwoa turned sharply, gathering both children's hands. "We should go," she said, her voice clipped, leaving no room for protest. She moved quickly through the crowd, her shoulders squared, though every step felt like walking through water. Behind her, she heard his footsteps falter, then stop, but his eyes still burned into her back like fire she could not escape. That night, long after the festival lights dimmed and the children slept tangled in their blankets, Adwoa sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the half-empty mug of tea gone cold. The echo of Jordan's voice haunted the silence, the way he said her name as if it still belonged to him. She pressed her forehead into her palms, her body trembling with emotions she had no room to name. She had survived without him, rebuilt herself with grit and prayer. Yet one glimpse had unraveled 3 years of armor. Outside, the city hummed with night traffic, but inside, Adwoa knew her life had just shifted. Jordan Carter was back, and nothing would remain untouched. That certainty echoed inside Adwoa's chest as she lay awake, the city's night hum slipping through thin curtains. Morning came sharp and relentless. She packed school lunches, tied shoelaces, and brushed curls into neat braids, all while her mind replayed the way his eyes had widened when he saw Eli. The twins' chatter was a shield, but once the door shut behind them and silence reclaimed the apartment, memory bled in. The past did not knock. It stormed in, dragging with it the nights she had stood waiting in a dress she bought on credit. Clutching the ring box he said he would bring, believing love was enough. She had waited hours. Then the phone call came, not from him, but from a relative she barely knew, saying his father had collapsed, that Jordan was at the hospital. She understood at first. Days later, when he didn't show up, when her messages went unanswered, when his family's words turned cold and dismissive, she realized she had been erased. Every door she knocked on stayed closed. The final blow came in the form of silence, a void louder than betrayal. Now that same silence stood in her living room, staring back at her with the sound of a saxophone. The following afternoon, she tried to avoid the community center, but Eli begged to see the instruments again, his small voice insistent. Adwoa hesitated, then gave in, unwilling to crush his excitement. The center buzzed with rehearsals. Volunteers arranged chairs, teenagers tuned guitars, and the choir warmed up in layered harmony. The scent of polish and wood filled the air, blending with the low hum of voices. She gripped her children's hands, intending to move quickly, but his shadow intercepted hers near the hallway, lined with framed photographs of past concerts. "Adwoa," Jordan said, softer this time, but his tone carried an urgency that made her shoulders stiffen. She didn't turn immediately. Instead, she focused on Eli, tugging toward a drum kit, Ava clutching her skirt. Finally, she faced him, her jaw set, her gaze hard. "You had 3 years," she said, her voice steady, "and you filled them with nothing." His expression tightened, pain flickering across his features. "You think I wanted it that way?" His hand curled into a fist, then released, trembling with restraint. "I tried. My father's illness, the company, my family made sure." "Your family made sure I vanished," she cut in, her words slicing. "They told me I wasn't good enough, that I would ruin your future, and you let them decide for you." Her chest heaved, anger carving its way through old wounds. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I fought them, Adwoa. I came back to find you, but you were gone. You think I didn't search? I called. I wrote." Her laugh came sharp, bitter. "Letters. Calls. Where? Because I never saw a single one. You had the world at your feet, but you left me with 2 newborns and nothing but a gospel choir to keep me from drowning." The air between them thickened, every word pressing harder than the last. Eli glanced up from the drums, sensing tension, his small face clouding with confusion. Ava buried her cheek against Adwoa's hip, whispering that she was scared. Adwoa stroked her daughter's curls, steadying her, though inside she burned. Jordan saw the fear and dropped his gaze, guilt crawling across his features, yet he did not back away. The door at the end of the hall opened, and Camille entered, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Tall, poised, her tailored suit spoke of money and authority. She smiled at Jordan first, then shifted her gaze toward Adwoa, her expression assessing, sharp but not unkind. "We need to finalize details for the New York contract," Camille said, her tone clipped as if rehearsed. She glanced at the twins, her brow raising, curiosity flashing before she masked it. "Am I interrupting?" Adwoa's skin prickled under the woman's scrutiny. She saw it clearly. Camille was everything Jordan's family would have wanted for him. Perfect pedigree, perfect timing. Yet when Jordan answered, his voice was low, distracted. "We'll talk later." His eyes never left Adwoa. Camille's smile faltered, but she inclined her head politely, turning back toward the office, her heels fading into silence. Adwoa exhaled, steadying herself. "That," she said, gesturing toward the closed door, "is the life you chose. This," she added, pressing her hand gently on Eli's shoulder, "is the life I had to build without you." Jordan's throat worked as he swallowed, his face raw with conflict. "I didn't choose to lose you," he whispered. His voice cracked, softer than she had ever heard it. "But I am here now." The words rang hollow against the years that had passed. She drew herself taller, pulling both children closer. "Being here now doesn't erase the nights I sang to keep us fed. It doesn't erase their questions when they ask why they don't have a father. And it won't erase the truth. Presence is not a gift you hand out when convenient. It's a duty." For a moment, silence pressed in, heavier than the choir rehearsing down the hall. Jordan's eyes shimmered, but Adwoa turned away, guiding her children toward the exit. She didn't look back, though she felt his gaze burning into her with every step. That evening, after the twins slept, Adwoa stood at her window, the city lights flickering like restless fireflies. Her hands clenched the sill, her chest heaving with unspent rage. She thought of Camille's polished smile, Jordan's broken whisper, the weight of Eli's question unspoken. She had built her world from ashes, every brick laid with sacrifice. She had no space for ghosts who returned only when it suited them. Yet the truth haunted her. The sound of that saxophone, the familiarity in Eli's eyes, the undeniable pull of history. Her battle was no longer just survival. It was deciding whether to open the door to a storm she had barely survived once before. The thought sat heavy as dawn crept through thin curtains, painting Adwoa's apartment in pale light. She moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing breakfast with measured motions, determined not to let last night's confrontation poison her children's morning. Yet when Eli hummed the same tune Jordan had played, each note imperfect but recognizable, her chest tightened. The melody had taken root, carried into her home, as if her son's blood remembered it. That afternoon, as she picked the twins up from the after-school program, Jordan stood waiting near the gate. He didn't approach immediately. He watched, hands shoved deep in his pockets, his posture tense as though restraining himself. Adwoa's first instinct was to turn away, but Eli broke free, running toward him with excitement only a child could muster. Jordan crouched, catching him mid-stride, lifting him high before Adwoa could protest. Eli laughed, his arms hooked around Jordan's neck, the sound pure, disarming. For a moment, the world stilled. Adwoa's pulse surged with panic, then fury. She reached for her son, but Jordan's eyes met hers, not pleading, but steady, as if saying he wasn't running anymore. That night, instead of retreating, he arrived at her building carrying groceries in worn paper bags. Not luxury brands, but simple items she recognized from the discount store she frequented. She wanted to slam the door, but Eli clung to his leg, Ava shyly peeking from behind the couch. Against her better judgment, she let him step inside. He placed the bags on the counter and began unpacking with an awkward focus, lining up canned beans, cereal, and milk. "I didn't come to talk," he said quietly. "I came to help." She folded her arms, watching, unwilling to be swayed. Yet when Ava tugged at his sleeve, handing him a comb, his hands trembled. But he knelt, fumbling with her curls. The first attempt left tangles worse than before. Ava wincing, but he didn't quit. He tried again, slower, listening as Adwoa guided him. When the braid finally held, crooked but neat, Ava giggled and hugged his neck. The sight unraveled something inside her, though she fought to hide it. She remembered all the nights she had braided in silence, exhaustion numbing her fingers. Now he was there, late but present, and presence mattered more than words. Still, anger pressed close. When the children ran to the bedroom with snacks, she turned on him. "You don't get points for showing up once. They need more than one good evening." His gaze didn't waver. "Then I'll show up again, and again." The following days tested that promise. He appeared at the market before she finished her shift, carrying bags alongside her. He sat in the church basement while she rehearsed with the choir, quietly tuning his saxophone, adding gentle riffs that wove around the harmonies. The choir members exchanged glances, some wary, others curious, until the director finally nodded, allowing his sound to join theirs. For the first time in years, Adwoa heard her voice lifted not in loneliness, but in duet, the music threading them together against her will. One evening, as Eli practiced with a toy harmonica, Jordan knelt beside him, echoing each squeak with polished notes from his sax. The boy's eyes lit, and soon their sounds tangled, playful, imperfect, yet alive. Adwoa stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her throat aching. The scene was dangerous. It looked too much like family. She almost interrupted, but then Ava climbed onto her lap with a book, whispering, "Can we keep him?" The words struck deeper than any argument. She kissed her daughter's curls but did not answer. Camille returned days later, stepping into the rehearsal hall with her usual poise. She cornered Jordan after practice, her tone crisp. "New York wants signatures. Delays won't be tolerated." Adwoa overheard, her chest tightening, certain he would choose the life that had always fit him better. Yet Jordan surprised them both. "I can't leave right now," he said, voice calm but unyielding. Camille's eyes narrowed, disappointment flickering, yet beneath it a strange softness lingered. Later, as she passed Adwoa, she spoke without malice. "He's stubborn. If he stays, it's not for contracts." Then she walked away, leaving tension hanging. That night, Jordan found Adwoa outside the community center, the cool air biting through her thin jacket. "You heard her," he said. She nodded, wary. He drew a breath, his hands tightening into fists before releasing. "I won't pretend I deserve another chance, but I won't vanish again. If all I can do is show up, buy groceries, braid hair, play music with them, I'll do it. Every day." His eyes glistened, his voice rough but steady. She wanted to believe him, but belief was dangerous. "Promises are easy," she said, her tone cutting, though her heart trembled. "Consistency isn't." He met her gaze without flinching. "Then watch me." The challenge hung in the air, heavy and unbreakable. For the first time, she saw not just regret, but resolve, not just guilt, but determination. And though fear gnawed at her, another truth pressed closer. The storm had already entered her life again, and maybe, just maybe this time, it carried the chance of rebuilding instead of ruin. That thought lingered with Adwa as she walked into the community center days later, the choir's voices swelling against peeling walls. She carried a folder under her arm, bills tucked inside, reminders of rent due and repairs ignored. In the corner of the main hall, Jordan bent low beside Eli, showing him how to finger simple scales on a borrowed keyboard, his patience startling in its steadiness. Ava perched on a chair, humming along, her curls bouncing in rhythm. The sight unsettled her, not because it was unwelcome, but because it whispered of permanence she dared not trust. After rehearsal, the director pulled Adwa aside, concern etched in his lined face. "The lease is expiring. We need funds or a sponsor to keep this place alive," he said. His words carried the weight of finality, and her stomach dropped. The community center wasn't just a building. It was a sanctuary, a stage, a classroom, and an anchor for children like hers. She nodded, promising to try, though she had no plan beyond survival. Jordan overheard, his expression shifting, and later that night, he appeared at her doorstep with a proposal she dreaded to hear. "We can save the center," he said, laying out papers on her small table, sketches of investment plans. His voice was calm but eager. "I'll cover the costs, ensure everything runs. You won't have to worry again." She felt the air leave her chest, fury and fear surging together. "There it is," she answered, her tone sharp. "The Savior Act. Money as bandage, control disguised as kindness." His jaw tightened, but he didn't retreat. "That's not what this is." She leaned closer, eyes blazing. "If you want to be part of this, then you don't buy it. You build it with us. And you don't stand above. You stand beside." Silence stretched, taut as a wire, until he exhaled, lowering his shoulders. "Then tell me how," he said. For the first time, she saw not arrogance but humility. The man stripped of certainty. She explained. The center would remain in community hands, a board formed with her, the pastor, and a neighborhood elder, with him as supporter, but never sole owner. No decision could strip away the free programs for children. His eyes searched hers, then he nodded slowly. Acceptance breaking through resistance. Agreed. In the days that followed, his resolve was tested. He signed his name not at the top, but on the same line as the others, committing without conditions. He arrived early to sweep floors, stayed late to fix broken chairs, his tailored jackets replaced with rolled-up sleeves. Edwoa watched him labor in silence, sweat darkening his collar, and though suspicion lingered, it warred now with a reluctant respect. The choir noticed too, some offering cautious smiles, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Slowly the space transformed, not through his money, but through his hands. One evening, Adwoa found him painting a wall with Eli perched on a step stool beside him. The boy laughed as streaks of blue covered his small hands, Jordan grinning despite the mess. Ava skipped past with brushes, twirling like a dancer. Adwoa stood in the doorway, caught between the ache of memory and the sharp edge of present truth. She stepped inside, placing her hand on the wall, feeling the fresh paint cool under her fingers. "This is what matters," she said quietly. He looked at her, paint smudged on his cheek, and whispered back, "I know." But the tension did not vanish. Camille appeared once more, her presence crisp as glass, delivering documents that required Jordan's decision. New York won't wait, she told him, eyes narrowed, tone deliberate. If you refuse, they'll cut ties for good. Jordan held the papers, his shoulders rigid, the choice pressing like iron. Edwoa stood apart, refusing to interfere, determined not to beg him to stay. This was his battle. The silence stretched until Jordan dropped the papers onto the table, the echo sharp. Then they'll cut ties, he said. Camille's lips parted, stunned, yet she did not argue. Instead, she studied him, then glanced toward Edwoa. He's different now, she said simply, before walking away. The weight of his decision shifted the ground beneath them. That night, as the center hosted its reopening, the hall swelled with neighbors, choir voices rising in gratitude. Jordan lifted his saxophone, notes soaring above the crowd, threading through gospel harmonies. Adwa stood at the front, leading the song, her voice firm, her eyes occasionally catching his. Eli tapped rhythm on a cajon. Ava swayed beside him, the family framed in sound and light. Midway through the music, the children rushed to Jordan, clinging to his legs. Eli looked up, his voice carrying clearly above the instruments. "Daddy?" The word cut through the hall, through Adwoa's defenses, through every wall she had built. Jordan froze, tears breaking loose, his instrument lowering as his arms circled them. The crowd erupted in applause, not for performance, but for redemption. Adwoa's throat closed, her vision blurring, yet she held her voice steady, finishing the hymn. The center, once threatened, pulsed with new life, and within it, her family stood not in fragments, but in fragile wholeness. Later, as the lights dimmed and the last chairs were stacked, she walked past Jordan, standing in the doorway, the children asleep in his arms. She met his gaze, steady now, not pleading but firm. If you stay, it's every day, not when it's easy, not when it looks good, every day. His nod was small, his voice rough. Every day. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe he meant it. Every day. His promise still echoed in her mind long after the reopening night, long after the crowd had gone and the hymn had faded. Edwoa stood at her window the following morning, dawn breaking soft over cracked rooftops, the city alive with the distant hum of buses and voices. Behind her, Eli stirred on the couch where he had fallen asleep, clutching his toy harmonica, while Ava curled beside him, breathing slowly, her curls tumoring across the blanket. And across the room, in a chair too small for his frame, Jordan sat slumped, the twins' school bags resting by his feet. He had not left when the applause ended. He had carried them home, stayed through the night, and now watched the day begin in silence. She studied him, the weight of his choice pressing deeper than words. The days that followed sharpened that vow. Jordan walked with her to the market at dawn, his shoulders bent under bags of flour and rice. He rose early to prepare breakfast with clumsy hands, burning toast and learning through laughter and frustration. At school pickups, he knelt to tie shoelaces, his business phone ignored as teachers greeted him with cautious curiosity. The choir noticed his constancy too, his sax weaving with their harmonies, no longer an intrusion, but a thread. Each action was small, almost ordinary, yet each struck Adwoa with the force of memory undone. For once, she did not feel alone in carrying the weight of tomorrow. Still, fear lingered. At night, when the apartment grew quiet, she would question if this steadiness was temporary, if the man before her would tire and disappear as before. She guarded her heart, building walls even as the twins' laughter carved openings she could not seal. One evening, when Eli presented a crooked drawing of their family, 3 figures holding hands beneath a roof, Adwoa felt her throat close. Jordan's figure was drawn taller, his face smeared with a heavy line of crayon. Yet it was the label in childish letters that pierced her. Daddy. Weeks passed, and the community center thrived, the new paint gleaming beneath fresh lights, children filling the halls with songs and laughter. One night the board gathered, the pastor, the elder, Edwoa, and Jordan, the table scattered with papers and plans. Tension hummed as they discussed finances, upcoming events, and programs. Adwoa spoke firmly, her voice steady, ensuring the vision remained anchored in the neighborhood. Jordan listened, contributing without dominance, deferring when necessary. For the first time, she saw his strength not in control but in surrender, in choosing partnership over power. It unsettled her, yet it soothed something long broken. But life never offered victories without trial. Near the end of the month, a letter arrived, urgent repairs required for the roof, costs exceeding their reserves. Adwoa stared at the notice, the paper trembling in her hands. Old panic surged, memories of unpaid bills clawing back. She braced herself for Jordan to offer money again, to attempt a rescue with a check. Instead, he placed his hand on hers and said quietly, "We'll raise it, together." He called former colleagues, leveraged contacts not for profit but for donations. Adwoa organized benefit concerts, the choir lifting their voices for survival. Children painted signs, neighbors sold food, and He Street was alive with purpose. The center was saved not by one man's wealth, but by a community bound tighter than steel. The night of the fundraiser, the hall overflowed, lights dimmed, voices thundered. Adwoa led the choir, her song fierce, her spirit unyielding, while Jordan's sax cried in harmony, the sound carrying through the rafters. The twins stood between them on stage, clapping in rhythm, their eyes bright. When the final note rang, the crowd erupted, not just in applause but in unity, as if the whole neighborhood had reclaimed something sacred. Tears blurred Adwoa's vision, not from fear but from gratitude, the realization that presence, shared and unbroken, was more powerful than any promise made in absence. Later that night, as the hall emptied and the children slept across folding chairs, Adwoa stood with Jordan beneath the fading lights. She looked at him, his shirt damp with sweat, his hands calloused from labor. For the first time, she did not see the man who left, but the man who stayed. Her voice was soft, edged with steel. "If this is real, it won't be easy. I won't let you vanish without consequence. They deserve more than words." He met her gaze, unwavering. "Then hold me accountable. Every day." The air between them shifted, no longer charged with anger, but with possibility, fragile yet alive. The following morning, as sunlight poured through the center's windows, Adwoa arrived to find Jordan sweeping the floor, while Eli practiced on a borrowed piano, and Ava hummed at his side. The picture was ordinary, almost mundane, yet it struck her with force. Ordinary was what she had prayed for. Ordinary was safety. Ordinary was hope. She stepped inside, setting down her bag, and for the first time in years allowed herself to exhale without fear. In that moment, she understood that endings were not always final and beginnings were not always loud. Sometimes they came quietly, in the sound of a broom against wood, in the warmth of children's laughter, in the steady presence of a man who had chosen to remain. The storm had not vanished, but she no longer faced it alone. And as gospel rose once more through the rafters, Adwoa Owusu knew this was not just a reunion, it was the start of a new life, built not on broken promises, but on the unyielding rhythm of every day. To my cherished family here at Elite Romance, if you believe that love is not proven in promises, but in presence, comment "Every day matters." Like this story, if it reminded you that consistency is the true language of the heart, share it with someone who deserves to know that redemption is possible. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Elite Romance for more unforgettable journeys where ordinary moments become extraordinary love. Inside the hall, the lights dimmed, the children asleep on their chairs, and Adwoa whispered into the quiet, her voice trembling but strong. "Life doesn't guarantee safety," she said, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. Jordan placed his hand over hers. "But love gives us courage when we choose to stay." She exhaled, leaning into him, not as a woman clinging to the past, but as one daring to step into tomorrow. His lips touched hers unhurried, steady, not like fireworks, but like a dawn that refused to fade. The kind of kiss that did not promise perfection, but showed up every single morning. The camera would fade here, not with applause, not with a spectacle, but with her whisper, barely more than breath, carrying the weight of everything they had endured. "We will never face another storm alone."